So once you have your functionality in place, you've made sure you've avoided conflicts with other plugins and you've made sure that your plugin performs well, you want to make sure that users get the most of it. And so there's different ways you can do that in terms of adding extra capabilities to the back end or other elements to be able to make it easy for users to start using your plugin. Because it's really easy for somebody to download a plugin, not understand how it works, delete it, and just keep looking for what they need and what they can easily figure out. While your plugin might have been the best one at what it does, if they can't figure it out, they're going to keep moving. So the first area is translation. There's a wonderful mechanism in WordPress that's built in that can let you easily make text strings translatable so that you can have the whole admin page show up in different languages. WordPress itself uses this to be able to provide translations of the whole WordPress backend to different languages. Something to be aware of is that the user community is very eager to give back to the plugin developers by providing translations. I've translated my first plugin about a month ago, and I've already had 2 users out of nowhere contact me and tell me, well, I'm working on a plugin for my language and I'll soon be sending you something over. So you should soon be seeing link library in Brazilian and in Danish based on some things that some of my users have done. So the way to work with translation, there's actually a few different things to be done in terms of the plugin development, is first of all to load what's called a text domain. So what you specify here is a name for a text domain and then a path to where your language files are going to be located. A translation file is really just translating a list of combinations of strings. So you're going to have the string in the original language, maybe English, and then you're going to have the string in some foreign language, be it French, Italian, or whatnot. At runtime afterwards, WordPress is going to figure out which string to use. So every time it needs to render a string, it's going to look it up. Now what's going to tell it to do that lookup is to use one of the 2 following functions. So you have first of all the _e function that will echo the string or its translation to the screen. So you have the _e function that takes 2 parameters, the string and then once again that's that text domain that we defined in the first function call. Now if you don't want to output the translated string, if you want to put it inside of a variable and do something with it, then what you can use is the __ function. It looks a little bit weird on screen, but it is the function that will once again look up a string, figure out its translation, and give it back to you so that you can use it on the screen. Now in terms of creating these translations, there's actually plugins in WordPress to be able to do this. So admin plugins that will let you modify and write up a translation files, or there's desktop clients like POEdit that will actually let you load up a file and then be able to create a translation for any given language. The next thing that you can do for users is to try to add tooltips to your admin pages. So as I mentioned before, users are not great at reading documentation, nor facts, nor anything that means they have to read stuff. So what you can do is have tooltips inside the interface so that whenever they hover over a field or click inside of it, then they're going to get some help that's specific to that part of the admin page that's going to tell them how to use that element. So this can be great both for new users so that they can figure out how to use things, or if there's things that are kind of complicated and you might even want a reminder when you're doing it for the 5th time or the 10th time, then these will come up and give that contextual information to your user. So to implement tooltips, what I've used myself a lot is the TipTip plugin. So that's a jQuery plugin, and I have the address here on the slide. And the effect that you get to see when you actually have a field is you get a nice little semi-transparent box that's going to have various text information in there, and then the user can read that as he's hovering in the box or as he's clicked inside of it, and then he can know what he has to do for that part of the admin interface. The next thing that I do a lot in my plugins is try to think about adding a debug mode inside of there. So the debug mode is something that typically users would turn on when you're trying to help them figure out why the plugin isn't behaving as you expect to on their site. So users could go in the back end, check a box, save their settings, and then afterwards you would get extra information. Now the way I've done that to be able to avoid downtime on people's site is to add debug information as HTML comments in the page. So Visually, you don't see it. It does take a little bit longer to render the page based on how many comments you're going to be spitting out, but at least this way, it's invisible to visitors on the website. Now, the kind of information that I spit out inside of these comments is things like plugin options. So just write out what all the options are, and in this way you can scan and figure out if they've configured something wrong. I also do things like put queries in there to see if there's a query that's getting a strange parameter or not being put together properly as expected. The query results, so to figure out if there's just something wrong with the results and what's coming out of the user's database. To work with these things, the printr function is great to be able to easily see what's inside of variables and print it on screen, and then just your standard HTML comment tags around those will just do great. And so an example of the kind of output that I might be producing when users activate debug mode is something like this here, where we can see this is the categories output, and then here's the query that's being executed. So then I can easily go in there and understand what's happening, and I might see something very obvious in terms of the syntax that's wrong. Something else I've done in the past is also be able to copy and paste these queries and bring them on my own server and then run them, and my phpMyAdmin page might go in there and tell me that there's something wrong with the query, and now I'll quickly be able to put my finger on it. A few last good practices before I conclude this presentation. The first one is to always think of backward compatibility. As soon as you're going to think about removing a feature, somebody is going to let you know that they're using it. So I know in my case, when I started to introduce the admin page and the shortcodes, I thought, well, people won't need to use the core PHP functions on their sites to be able to do these things. They'll much prefer using the nice interfaces and the nice shortcodes. Well, I was wrong, and very quickly some users started to tell me that their whole site relied on having these functions in place. So I brought them back, and now I always make sure as I'm moving forward that I always keep all the capability there as is as I'm introducing new things. Of course, I might fix a bug somewhere, but if I'm adding something new, I'm making sure I don't break something that was there before, and I don't remove things on purpose. The next thing I want to mention is you should think of all the different types of users when you have to think about upgrade procedures. So let's say, for example, you have a plugin that writes its own tables or modifies things in the database. When that plugin gets upgraded, if you want to add an extra field to a table, well, you might want to do that on the deactivation or deactivation procedure. But what about those people that do manual upgrades? I know I personally like to do that. I just get my files, upload them to my site via FTP, and then run them through and just keep running. I don't bother going and deactivating and reactivating the plugin. So here what you can do, well, there's a few things. You can always keep a version number in your plugin options so that you can compare against that afterwards during execution, either when you're rendering the admin page or when you're rendering the actual output of your plugin. And then if the version is wrong, then you could go and run the activation function. So you could go and actually do what the user thought he was avoiding, and the first time he's going to go into the admin page or see the output of the plugin, he's going to have done the upgrade, and then that's going to make sure everything is fixed. So add fields to your database or whatnot, and then you can just move forward with your website and not have to worry about all these different things inside of your plugin. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed learning about all of these different best practices in plugin development. You can view my site at the address below. Drop me an email if you have any questions on the different topics that I covered, or read more about my different plugins once again on my site on my WordPress plugins page. Thanks. Bye-bye.